So welcome back to certification, coach certification training, and another amazing live stream. So this one is going to be different than almost any of the live streams that I've run so far in certification. And as you may know at this point, these live streams are primarily to give more detail, more depth, and more understandings, more appreciation of different facets of the multifaceted world that you're stepping into as a new coach, as a newly certified coach, or soon to be newly certified coach. So we're still in officially week 3 here. Hey, Donzel. And today, as we have been talking about in week 3, we're talking about assessment coaching. But today, this is really literally just a short conversation around some tips that I'd like to offer you for integrating. And so let me just cover a little bit around integrating just for a second. In certification, we cover the 3 most advanced disciplines, what I call a discipline of coaching, which is really a set of skills and capacities and abilities and techniques and tactics and strategies that you bring together to deliver one specific kind of what you might call a deliverable, a value, if you will, or a benefit to your client. And we have 3 of those. We have accountability discipline, delivering action to your client. We have the assessment discipline, delivering clarity and awareness to your client. Hey, Paco. And then finally, we have strategy, which is what we're about to cover in week 4, which is really delivering how to go about actually producing a different result on the inside or the outside, really transforming the approach to take, the journey that a client may take to achieve what they're after in life. And in any area of life, there are actions you got to take. There are strategies that will optimize that result and make it most beneficial. And there's also a need for awareness of yourself and others in the process of actually accomplishing things. Taking action or not taking action can be literally life and death for your client, depending on their area. Like especially it's like health coaching or something like that. But it could be the difference between going bankrupt and getting rich. It could be the difference between falling in love and being with your closest soulmate and losing that love, right? And the same with strategy. Use the wrong strategy, even if you're doing it at the right time, or the right strategy at the wrong time, you could be life or death. It could be the difference between winning and losing in business or career. It could be the difference between being lonely and being connected deeply with your family or your loved ones, right? So the areas of action and strategy, which we're covering in accountability and strategy coaching, are absolutely critical areas, critical deliverables. But assessment, what it delivers is more of an awareness, more of an understanding of who somebody is, what makes them tick, what their strengths and weaknesses are, what their drives are, what they're motivated by. And these help us predict and understand very important aspects of how we might modify what we do as an accountability coach or a strategy coach or any other kind of coach for that matter as well. So one of the opportunities that you have, even if you're in the mastery program at Master Coach University and you've been mastering these disciplines, is to use these disciplines very close together and eventually bring them so close that they're happening in the same session or that they're happening in the same moment. You're integrating these very advanced aspects of coaching into an entire conversation, a coaching relationship. Ultimately what takes absolute precedence over every aspect of what you are as a coach and what you do as a coach is the relationship. Coaching is a relationship. It's a conversational relationship. And so underneath that are the conversations that occur, and underneath those conversations are different disciplines and benefits and deliverables, and underneath those disciplines and deliverables and benefits are skills and tactics and techniques and the lower aspects of the hierarchy of who you are and what you do as a coach, right? So we're talking about integration of different disciplines to the entirety of what serves your client, what serves the coaching relationship, and ultimately what serves how you contribute to the world as a coach. So today, we're going to talk about specifically integrating assessments as a tool, not just assessment coaching, because there's really no such thing as assessment coaching. I mean, we call it assessment coaching because we're basically just coaching however you coach using the tools of assessments to support you and your client in understanding what makes them tick, what makes their teams tick, what makes their family tick, strengths, weaknesses, drives, the ways they think, etc. So we're using that as a tool. So we're talking about integrating integrating assessments with other coaching disciplines. So literally, I'm just going to give you some how-to. I'm going to give you some tips on this, and then we're done today. It's going to be super fast. No big stories, no big metaphors, no big models. I'm just going to give you the how-to, which I seldom do because I know a lot of times that falls flat. But today it just seemed like there were so many disparate ways that you might integrate these. I just wanted to give you the value and let you run with it if you're going to be using assessments as a tool, which I, of course, advise you to do in some way, shape, or form. So in strategy coaching, which we haven't really studied yet, but the work on transformational work on the inner strategy that somebody might have, or outer transformation of someone's step-by-step strategy to produce a result in the outside world, you can use these assessments for diagnosis. You just use them to figure out like what's stopping them, what's the issue with their strategy, what are the blind spots in their strategy, inner or outer. Because you could see that. You could see that in the behavioral profiles that we have. We could see that even in the values profiles, that there's certain philosophies or values that they might overvalue or undervalue or overappreciate or underappreciate. In accountability, you could definitely, as I just suggested, use the assessments to locate literal blind spots in your client, the places where they haven't really been aware that might be stopping them. The only way something stops you from taking action is that it is actually a blind spot for you or your client. Finding what stops your client, you can see that in the disc. Somebody's really low D, confrontation might stop them, or fear might stop them, or lack of action, or laziness might stop them. But all sorts of things that lower Ds are more likely to have as fundamental stops for them, as barriers for them, than high Ds, let's say. It doesn't mean high Ds can't have them. It's just you can guesstimate more quickly if your client is struggling with that based upon what their disc is. I know very specific disc and values profiles and disc and values patterns where even if I've never done a coaching session with them before, like the other day, brand new client I started working with, she was like 100I, and I said, your biggest thing that stops you is not that you can't do something and not that you don't get excited about doing it. It's that once it stops being fun, you quit. You get bored and you quit. And she's like, oh my gosh, that's like my entire life that you just explained there. Never talked to her before, but I just knew 100 eyes, that's likely what's going on. And I knew a little background from what she was facing in terms of like truly fully committing to this new job that she was working on. And now she's performing immensely in that new job for a variety of reasons, partially the coaching I've been giving her based upon her disc results, which I already had even before I started talking to her. So an accountability used to locate things that stop them. Things that they might use to cover up as well. We could see inauthenticities in the various adapted style in the disc versus the natural. The adapted is what's not really authentic in them, and the natural is. So if those are radically different, you could see literally what they cover up at work, in the way they operate, So yeah, I appreciate that, Paco. Another high I that can confirm that, right? No doubt. And values conflicts, as Paco just said in the chat. If you have a values conflict, that could be stopping them from taking action. Very simple stuff. If you could see the pattern, instantly offers value in the accountability discipline or in strategy for that matter. So across the board, one of the great ways that you can integrate assessments into your coaching, however you coach, is using it for rapport building. Because if you really understand a client through just reading their disc and values, reading their assessment results, you can very quickly appreciate their strengths, some of their challenges, what is important to them, how they communicate, and you can align with that instantly because you understand what makes that person tick, especially if you know and you've worked with a lot of clients in that way. You see the pattern, you would immediately adapt to how you need to communicate with them to get natural and instant rapport. Another way that you could build rapport or that you can leverage these assessments is through mind reading. So that's kind of what I did with that new client that I was working with. I just told her what I already knew was likely true and kind of read her mind even before she said it. Instant rapport, instant effective coaching relationship where I have a lot more influence with her than I would have if I was just like guesstimating what was going on because I didn't have her assessment results or I couldn't read the assessment. So mastering these and using them to generate influence and rapport, and that includes a certain amount of mind reading as well. Mind reading is a phenomenal kind of, they call it cold reading nowadays, but it's basically a technique where you have an 80 or 90% probability that you're correct about something that's going on in their mind, and you just go ahead and say it with full confidence. You could be wrong. That's totally okay, because then you pivot or backpedal. That is a technique too. But when you do that and they are like, wow, you're right. And again, most of the time they'll say that, like 1 out of 20 of those approaches will it actually backfire. Because even if you're not fully accurate, they'll see where what you're saying is likely true, right? It's like a horoscope. That's what the power of cold reading. And it gives you instant rapport and influence with that client. And then, yes, if you're not fully accurate, we're not talking about like doing double-blind, placebo-controlled studies on a client. We're just talking about reaching out to them, sharing ideas, and starting the conversation. This is not about perfection here, okay? It's not what we're aiming for as a coach or with our coaching conversation or relationships. Further, I think I mentioned this last time, and I will link to the video about why to use assessments in your coaching practice. It's actually in the description here already, I think, which covers this in a little bit more detail. But in relationship coaching, further on that, it helps with predicting communication issues between people in relationships, other issues in a relationship as well, when you see both results. Life purpose and career coaching obviously is a huge impact there, and I talk about that in more detail. I'll skip it right now, but if you go to the tag in the YouTube video or the description in any of these, I've linked to that video, so check that out. We talk about how to use assessments in life purpose coaching, career coaching. Business is the biggest application for assessments in coaching. We already talked about a lot of that in that other video, so check that out. But initial consults and business analysis, that's where we talked about using these assessments to diagnose business issues and advise businesses very quickly and efficiently, which businesses love efficiency. Communication and management coaching. Anywhere where communication is important in business, these assessments are just priceless, because it teaches us how somebody naturally communicates, where they're going to be weak in their communication. You think in sales that might be a little important? You think that's not where the money comes from in businesses? I mean, that your hand is in the pocket of these organizations. You think they're going to fire you as the coach? Not if you're effective using these tools. So use them to diagnose, use them to advise businesses very quickly and efficiently and effectively, and anything in communication or management coaching. Anything around influence, leadership, and management of human resources or human prospects for that matter. And that also includes team communication, how teams collaborate and work together, how they communicate with each other. Team development, of course. Executive communication and development. Executives' communication is like the number one thing that they need to master that they usually haven't mastered yet. And so these assessments can help you show them where their blind spots are, where they're challenged in communication, and other areas as well, of course. But specific to communication, you can help them kind of manage and improve the areas where they kind of have a communication Achilles heel, if you will, and really help them move that to the next level. And executives really know that's important. And by the way, when I've worked with executives in executive coaching realm, what I find is that the business will hire me to work with that executive because they want that executive to succeed. They want that executive to have really powerful communication because they're paying them six figures. That executive is the highest paid, member of the team usually. And if that executive is not effective as a communicator, they can't reach people, they can't kind of sell their position, they can't like put a good slide deck together and get the other executives on board, like they're not worth as much, right? They don't need to promote an executive just because they're a good accountant or a good salesperson. You promote them to that level because they can lead, they can influence, they can reach people in ways that other people can't. And so when I work with executive clients, like it's just, I always take them to the next level, partially to be fair, because I understand communication skills. I understand what they can use as strategies, as a good strategy coach, to reach people that they might not reach naturally if they don't use the approaches, strategies, and techniques I offer them. But on top of that, I also know where their natural strengths are because I've got them graphed in their assessment results. And so I can reach them at different levels and find their communication blind spots and Achilles heels and weaknesses, identify them quickly and efficiently, and cause breakthroughs in that area as well, because I know how to get rapport with them, mind read them, and communicate to them how they're going to overcome those challenges and conflicts as well. Executive development, of course, that's part of it. I can put together an entire executive development program just with the assessment results that I run on the executive. Now, I've never done that. I mean, it's usually free-form coaching. The executive directs the program, but many of these businesses they hire you. This hasn't happened for me yet, but they hire you because they want a programmatic approach that's customized to that executive, that the executive doesn't choose, that you choose. That you're like, hey, look, Mr. Executive or Mrs. Executive, I know you want all sorts of coaching, but these are the hoops that you need to jump through so you can develop yourself as an executive, as a leader, as whatever, as a business manager. And I'm going to teach you this, I'm going to show you this, I'm going to take you through these results. And if I have their assessment results, I can customize and tailor that program even before the executive gets involved, because I already know what that executive needs. And we can actually put together diagnostics that predicate what kind of development program do we want to use for an executive, and then pitch that to the sponsor, to the business, and say, this is what these executives need. This is what this executive needs. And then if we want to collaborate with the executive and say, hey, is this right? Do you want to validate this? Do you want to add anything to it? Sometimes that's a part of it as well, but it doesn't have to be. A lot of times executives don't know what's good for them. They don't know what's going to make the biggest difference. I'm not saying they always don't, and I'm not saying that I don't enjoy collaborating with an executive and let them lead their own program. I love that. But if the business is after something that is kind of like put on the executive, I can supply that. And I can supply validated empirical results that are provable, that are validated in statistical studies, because that's every assessment we use is like that, and it's legally viable as well. It's legally defensible because we've had plenty of legal backing and statistical backing and studies in some of the largest colleges on earth that have looked at our technologies and our assessment results and say, this is proven that we know what this means, and I can develop a program based upon that data. Make sense? And if I can deliver that to a sponsor, that's worth a lot of money. That's worth, frankly, 2 or 3 times what I would probably charge a consumer for the exact same coaching, because the business has the budget for it and they want control and certainty that this is something that they absolutely can trust, and they're willing to pay extra for that. We had a couple comments here. Looking forward to getting going in Synergy, right? Very cool, Paco. Yeah, of course. And always an opportunity and a new point of view, specifically powerful psychographic like DISC and values and perspective of coach. Yeah, totally. There's a lot of different perspectives that are provided here, and we just leverage this other perspective that is empirical and is algorithmic rather than people. Because, a person can screw up, right? Human error is that's the biggest problem on earth probably, right? But if we have a system, like if I'm an airline pilot, speaking of metaphors, and I'm piloting my craft and I have no visibility, I can think I'm going left, I'm really going right. I mean, that's what happened. I mean, there are literally small craft pilots that have died because they were trying to seat of the pants fly without any visual reference points, and they were in a tight spin and they had no clue. They thought they were pulling up and they were actually diving. They were in a dive. That's human error. But then when you get your instruments working, and the instruments, the IFR in flying, instrument flight rules are abided by. You got your GPS and you got your horizon line. You got all these different things that like algorithmically prove what's going on. You can reset yourself even though that you don't know where you are and where you're going. The instruments do. A lot of times the autopilot does a better job than the humans, right? So now I'm not saying that's the way we want to operate as coaches, but we certainly can use that as a check and a balance. Another place this is used hugely today, and an area that I like to follow is in chess. Modern chess. If you don't use a computer to validate like the moves and all the little innovations that you have as a grandmaster, a lot of times you're going to lose. And there are some people that still play intuitively, but none of them beat the chess computers, right? So, like these algorithms, I'm not saying they're smarter than you, but they provide something that you don't provide. It's just like, not saying you're not capable of it. It's just like, why do it when you can get those results instantly from a computer and then leverage them and bring your humanity to that? That's our job, not to be a computer. We're not trying to beat the computer at its own game. So let's see. Paco says, can you talk about assessment for lead generation, using them in free sessions? So this is really more about integrating assessments in the ongoing coaching. When we talk about why use assessments, that's something that we did talk about very briefly. What I can tell you is that, again, the assessment is so riveting for a prospect that if you have the results on them and you can convince them that you are a master of that and you understand it, they're probably going to give you some time. And then it's just a matter of, again, using it in your coaching the way I'm describing. So it's not a matter of like, and I'll share this in a little while, but what I wouldn't advise is just go over the assessment results. That's your free session, right? No, discovery session is about discovering things. The assessment can help with that, but don't leave it on the assessment. Then bring your coaching out. So, because if they just value the assessment, they're probably not going to hire you as a coach, right? But if they value your ability to read the assessment plus your ability as a coach, which you can prove out in a free session, you combine all that together, that's a value add. So you don't want to just say, well, I just read these assessments. I'm not going to talk to you. I'm not going to bring coaching skills to the table. You got to prove yourself as a coach unless they were already kind of in love with you before the session, which a lot of times they're not. So I'll talk about that in a little while when we talk about some additional strategies and tips for this. So that's a little bit around using them in free sessions. Really, I just want to get them into the free session. I don't generally over leverage assessments in the free session itself. I'm using it to get the lead to show up, and then I got them. And I know my skills with or without an assessment are going to be more attractive for my prospect, since I know I can really transform them in that session, than just reading assessment. That's not true for every coach. Some coaches, it's probably better if they use the assessment, okay? So it's, I can't necessarily give you perfect advice about that because it's very customized how you might leverage those in a discovery session. But I can tell you what I do, which is I don't leverage the assessment. Anything beyond just a quick read and getting them to show up because they're so curious and they love what they see in the assessment itself. And then in terms of lead generation, look, I was watching this on Netflix the other night, and I'm just because it's so, to me, it's amazing. It's kind of it's an interest of mine, understanding why people follow cults, and the way that these certain personas and certain approaches for organizations and individuals have kind of captured people's imaginations, hearts, and minds many times to the point of doing something not too cool. And one of these stories, the famous one that actually coaching is rooted in, which is kind of odd or weird, is the origination of the the world of Scientology, which some people say is a religion, other people just say it's kind of personal development from the 1950s. But there's a there's a documentary on Netflix right now that was originally on some other network about them. They're in like their third season, and they talk about the mind control techniques and the marketing techniques that they use, and mostly trying to focus on uh, how ugly it is, and how bad it is for people, and people shouldn't be a part of this thing. And I have no opinion on the matter other than what it looks like. The optics are not good, right? But guess what? What you can understand and appreciate about that organization is they have raised, through basically personal development and coaching services, honestly, like multiple billions of dollars. I don't know exactly what they're worth, but I know they're worth more than like 2 or 3 billion, right? They're gigantic organization. They own some of the most priceless real estate on the planet. Okay. And their followers are like, really, they are like cult followers. They'll do anything for the leaders of that organization, up to a fault, to be fair, it seems. Guess how they got all their followers? Other than people recruiting, like multi-level marketing type of recruiting, like referrals and stuff like that, which, some people are kind of put up to, going out and fishing for people like, certain evangelical religions might do. The only other way that they've gotten people kind of hooked into their programs, which many of which include a certain amount of what they call auditing, which is basically coaching, right? Somebody listening to you and giving you advice and stuff like that and taking notes, is through an assessment, right? They have those stress tests or stress assessments. You could even see online. And their centers, they send their people out and say, hey, do you want to take an assessment? Do you want to take an assessment? And every once in a while, they get somebody who's a little green and like, ooh, an assessment. And they get interested in it. They take the assessment and they kind of suck them back over to the center, and they pitch them a program, and all of a sudden they're taking classes there and they're getting results. And then, pretty soon they're OT3, and they're worshiping Zorg or Gerg or whatever, whatever the deity is in that religion. I don't know. I'm not that high up in that organization, but the point being, like, that's lead gen, right? I mean, don't we do that on Facebook all the time? Aren't people taking like the color assessment, like what color am I, or what Star Wars character am I, or whatever, right? And these assessments, people know they're a joke. Like they're Okay, we're going to do a quick sound check here, make sure everything's okay. Ran out of battery on the old wireless. We should be better now, hopefully. The computer didn't lose any connections, so we should be in good shape. Let me know in the chat if you can hear me now. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? And then we'll keep going here. All right, I'm not getting any confirmation, so I'm going to go ahead and check. Go ahead and check audio one more time here. Oh, good. Okay, thank you, Paco. All right, cool. So I'm just going to start over on the keys because I don't know when I lost you. So keys to integrating assessments with your coaching disciplines or other coaching disciplines. So number one, make it a temporary visit. Don't live inside the assessment. You know, the assessment is not meant to be a substitute for your coaching. It's meant to be an additional addendum to it. It's meant to help accelerate your coaching, not replace it. Okay, so visit the assessment, but don't live there, right? Debrief it at the beginning. You know, debrief it at the beginning of the coaching relationship, and you can do that quite deeply. I'll spend 3 to 5 hours on debriefing somebody's assessment, but then once I've done that with them and they really have a deep understanding, and so do I, of what their results mean, we can refer back to that at any time through the rest of the coaching relationship, right? It could be tremendously valuable there. Also, remember, your client is not a graph, right? Your client is more than their graph. So yes, you'll see their graph, but don't treat them as if that's them, because that's not them. There's way more than we can ever measure on an assessment result. So do say things like, because of this, hey, someone with this profile will likely blank, right? Or, hey, this profile's tendency is, or this seems to show that you probably blank, blank, blank. Does that sound right? Right? We're talking about probabilities, tendencies, things about the profile or people that have taken the profile. You don't want to say, like, you don't want to speak about them by reading the assessment, because that could break rapport. Now, sometimes you might leverage that for mind reading purposes, but that's a temporary thing. You want to be careful about going too far down that road. So what you want to avoid, or don't say things like, hey, you are this, you're a high I, you're a high theoretical. That's just you, right? I've definitely been guilty of this in the past on a fairly regular basis, but it starts to get you too far down the road of like coaching the assessment rather than the human, right? You want to keep your eye on the human, not the assessment. Or to say something like you're blank, like if let's say they're a high I on the disc, you wouldn't want to say your eye is blank or your eye is making you blank. They don't have an eye, right? They don't have a theoretical value. They've taken an assessment and it shows that their theoretical on that particular assessment is high, right? So it's like people talk about it this way, like they own these things and like now they're there. They've collected these assessment results and they start to act like those are like diagnoses that define them or limit them, and they're just not. So it's got to be careful about that, because they'll start to take ownership of these things, and that's not what we're after. We're after them being aware of who they are and what makes them tick, not decide that they're a graph, right? So yeah, asking for confirmation. Would it be fair to say that, right? Things like that are great ways to soften your dependency on this and allow it to open the door to a conversation rather than close you off and make you decide, I'm judging you based upon this. You wouldn't want to say things like, okay, all high Ds are like that, right? Again, that's maybe a mind reading technique you might use every once in a while, but I would not lean on that too harshly. So that's it. That's everything I wanted to share with you tonight. We did a little bit of shorter session, which hopefully was refreshing. Sorry for the loss of the audio there for a second. If you know people that are using these tools or coaches that you think might have use for them, share this with them. I'm happy to share it. And also, best way to keep an eye on the next live stream that comes out while we're in training here would be to like and or subscribe, depending if you can subscribe here on YouTube, you can. On Facebook, you can't. But liking it tells the algorithm usually that you want more of this, and it'll share it with more people like you as well, which is really my mission, to reach as many coaches, leaders, managers, people that care about figuring this kind of stuff out as possible, so we can really make an impact on the world together. So if we can be partners there on that end, I'm so grateful for that. And regardless, I'll see you in the next live stream in week 3 of coach certification training. Take care, and I'll talk to you then.